been 10 years since 2016, a time where a very popular artist was absolutely ruling over a young and flourishing Fnaf fandom. I always wondered what happened to them, whether they rebranded or continued their series. I mean, their OCs were the outline for a lot of foundational Fnaf lore headcanons. But with every twist and turn, the more I dug up, the more I realized, oh, they disappeared for a really good reason, vanished. I mean, we're talking sending fans to harass people, potential grooming, racism, the works. So we need to have a chat about Rebornica and their scorned internet legacy.
This is gonna be great, Skedgie. The Fnaf fandom is full of kids. I love kids, Skedgie. I love kids!
Robernica, I would really not be screaming that on the top of your lungs. Before we start getting into any crazy shit, I need to give you a little tidbit on the Fnaf fandom during the Fnaf 1 and Fnaf 2 era, as well as some Robernica lore. When I tell y'all we had nothing in terms of characterization or backstory or anything, we had nothing. There were no Aftons, Michael or William. We sure as shit didn't have an Elizabeth. I mean, Purple Guy was an enigma at this point. He didn't get his first appearance until Fnaf 2. The only thing that we got during the Fnaf 1 era were the missing children posters, the main cast, and Mike Schmidt. So theories were not very flushed out, with the fandom demanding more. So with such little content for this game, it makes so much sense why Robernica had that huge rise. Also at the time, the internet was slowly but surely becoming more accessible to a wider audience. You need to think this is the era where a lot more rural areas were finally catching up to a more internet-focused economy. In 2014, a lot of my family still had dial-up internet because a lot of companies wouldn't offer anything else up in Appalachia. And for me and my immediate family, we moved from Appalachia around that time, and we couldn't afford the high internet prices. Do you know how hard it is to share 1 gigabyte of data with your mama? My Wii was sucking it all up watching Don't Mine at Night, My Little Pony. So with the internet becoming more accessible to a wider audience, anyone who uploaded original content would be swarmed and praised pretty much immediately, especially when it came to Fnaf, a giant blooming fandom with not a lot of canon content. Then enter Robernica. They were the absolute when it came to Fnaf headcanons and character building. Was the character building absolute character assassination? Yeah, absolutely, but it was Tumblr. Tumblr thought it was hilarious, and it did create this really nice, cohesive fandom synergy that not a lot of other fan bases had at the time. It also created an outlet for artists and creators to get in on their newest fandom hyperfixation, even with voiceover channels dubbing over Robernica's comics, whether they were doodles in a margin or a nice digital piece. People were constantly making fan art in their own headcanons, and it was amazing. So going through these characters now 11 years after they were created is kind of funny because of how wrong they were and how wrong we all got it. So I'm gonna go through and give you a brief synopsis of the story of their AU, talk about all of their characters, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty stuff, okay? Yeah. All right, so this AU story is all over the place. You just gotta walk with me, brother. Walk with me. Come on, let's go. Alright, so we're gonna go through some of these characters, y'all. So firstly, for the characters, we have Mike Schmidt, a hardened Bite of 87 survivor driven by anger and survival instincts. Mike works at Freddy's mainly to support his life and his partner, Doll. Even though he has a tough exterior, he's super mega insecure and emotionally fragile when pushed. He's also bald and has anger issues. Also wants to slam Toy Chica, which is canon. I don't know. Mike Schmidt in the Fnaf 2 era of this AU is more calm and more stable. He's more like a mentor, but also harbors resentment towards the animatronics, and he works to support his future with Doll, and occasionally helps Jeremy. Phone Guy is a nervous wreck. He masks fear with forced positivity. His fragmented communication and eventual injury makes you think that he has a deeper knowledge of all the bullshit happening around the pizzeria that he struggles to confront. For Boss, like, this ain't Metal Gear Solid, bro, but he's the owner of the pizzeria, a dickhead, fully aware of the past incidents and choosing to maintain operations despite that. He frequently pressures Mike and treats him as a reminder of the Bite of 87 and constantly makes him feel bad for it. Just like his creator, he's a victim blamer. He's Victim Blamer Jr., bro. Then we got Freddy Fazbear, who is a narcissist and self-proclaimed leader who masks his insecurity with authority and morbid humor for some reason, even though he I don't know, it could be like a coping mechanism or something. He also has a crazy ego and carries his grief over the loss of Golden Freddy. Also, these descriptions for the animatronics are pretty much just the spirits inside of them, because the animatronics are just vessels, but I digress. Bonnie is quiet, observant, and burdened by guilt. They know way more than they would like to admit, and their silence and self-doubt make them anxious and withdrawn from the rest of the group. Chica is energetic, talkative, and crazy particular. Chica balances a short temper with a nurturing, protective nature, especially towards children. She fights with Mike a lot, not to be confused with Toy Chica, who again, Mike wants to fuck. OG Chica doesn't fuck with Mike though. So, they don't fuck with each other. Foxy is emotionally unstable and trapped in the past, struggles with guilt, grief, and self-loathing. His unpredictable behavior stems from unresolved trauma and regret. Technically, Golden Freddy is 3 spirits, but there's one original spirit tied to Golden Freddy's endoskeleton, and then later 2 spirits inhabit Golden Freddy's suit, because the endoskeleton is separate from the suit. So I'm just gonna say Endo. The Endo is a friendly but lonely presence stuck in the back room, unaware of the full situation that's happening in the pizzeria. His mood cycles between playful and deeply depressed depending on traumatic anniversaries. The marionette is a emotionless entity who gains purpose by giving life to the children's spirits. Over time, he develops a childlike personality shaped by the children that he's protected. All right, my baby daddy, Purple Guy Vincent, is a calculating... Purple Guy Vincent is a calculating and observant killer who manipulates events from the shadows. He's very charming, a little creepy, but like in an endearing way. Even after death, he persists as a vengeful spirit, continuing to target Mike through possession. Also, he's a silly dude who loves toast. And he's Orple. Jeremy Fitzgerald is an anxious and traumatized young man seeking independence. Jeremy gradually gains confidence under Mike's influence. Despite being like a really fearful guy, he has a lot of resilience and a lot of empathy. Fritz Smith is an unlucky technician with a deep knowledge of animatronics and robotics. The presence of Fritz tends to disrupt situations rather than help them. He's a clumsy bitch, essentially. So this story begins in May of 1987 when Purple Guy Vincent is hired at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, setting into motion a chain of events that rapidly escalates over the following months. Yes, months. Walk with me, come on. By June of 1987, Vincent has already killed 2 children, and by September, a 3rd child is murdered outside the diner. November of 1987 becomes the most pivotal and densely packed period in the timeline because multiple incidents unfold almost simultaneously. So just during November of 1987, Purple Guy sabotages Golden Freddy, causing the suit to malfunction and its endoskeleton to be moved into the back room. At the same time, Mike Schmidt, as a toddler, right, coerced into crossing the line at Pirates Cove, leading directly to the bite of 87 that leaves Mike hospitalized and draws a lot of public attention. While everyone is fucked up and distracted, Vincent Purple Guy takes advantage of the chaos, hops in the empty Golden Freddy suit, and murders 5 additional children. These 5 additional children become Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, with the last one becoming the marionette. The 2 original victims are haunting the empty Golden Freddy suit, with one of the 2 original victims helping Kid Mike survive the bite with a promise that he will come visit them again. So by the end of November of 1987, there are 8 child victims. At the same time, the phone guy retrieves the security footage, files a report, leading to Vincent's arrest, conviction, and placement on death row before the end of the month. That was all just November 1987. So now we're in December of 1987, right? Okay, there's gonna be a lot of fucking dates thrown out for this one because it's just boom, 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 boom. So the marionette begins organizing the other spirits, placing them into animatronics, and concealing itself inside of Golden Freddy, cementing the haunting that defines the rest of the timeline. The marionette is now inside of Golden Freddy, along with the 2 other spirits that are inside Golden Freddy. So technically, there are 3 of them. But one of them's haunting the marionette and the other 2 are haunting the Golden Freddy suit. Are we following? Okay, bada bing, bada boom, it's a decade later. Now it's March 1996, and the spirits are getting more and more aggressive, causing the animatronics to behave erratically and violently, which is causing more murders and a sharp decline in the pizzeria's reputation. In November of 1997, the purple guy dies on death row, but his death is not the end of the cycle because Golden Freddy's endoskeleton in the back room reactivates shortly after. So the following year, February of 1998, Mike Schmidt, now an adult, the Bite of 87 victim, is hired at the pizzeria, and by March, the murder cases abruptly stop, suggesting a temporary stabilization of all the spirits in the pizzeria. But by September of 1998, the pizzeria is already scheduled for closure and reopening, and in November, the phone guy is severely injured, leading to the full shutdown of the location in December. So while the restaurant is shut down for renovations, they discover the marionette inside the Golden Freddy suit, which is then reintegrated into operations of the pizzeria, so now there's only 2 opposing spirits inside the Golden Freddy suit and 1 spirit inside the marionette. By October of 2000, the Golden Freddy endoskeleton reactivates once again and is scheduled to return to use in the restaurant. But this process goes wrong because it somehow became merged with Mangle, and that led to an unnamed security guard getting fired for allowing children to damage the animatronic. Who is this unnamed security guard? Fuck if I know. In November of 2000, Mike Schmidt got rehired again, and then 4 of the child spirits reawakened, and then December he's moved to the day shift. Then in January of 2001, Jeremy Fitzgerald takes over the night shift position, continuing the pattern of rotating employees tied to the increasingly unstable environment. By November of 2003 and onward, the pizzeria's business begins to recover, right? Even though the children's spirits are still active in the pizzeria, but surface level operations have improved, but there's still an underlying supernatural presence, and there's unresolved consequences for the events that began in 1987 that never disappeared and never had any closure. Also, apparently Vincent's supposed to be like haunting the pizzeria, but it's never explicitly stated whether he was haunting the fucking Golden Freddy endoskeleton that got combined with Mangle, which would indicate that fucking Vincent Purple Guy is stuck inside Mangle, which makes no fucking sense, but I digress. I'm getting mad. Lock in.
I think I need to mobilize my audience about this. Especially because of you. I, like him younger. As young as possible.
Actually, can I leave now? What begins in the mid-2010s with Robernica's rise is the age-old story of a young artist gaining traction inside of a distinctive fandom. In this case, because of their AU, they gained a highly engaging Tumblr fanbase and a large presence. But unfortunately, when you compress the years of roughly 2014 to 2019 into a single continuous narrative, what emerges isn't just growth in the fandom, it's a sustained pattern of control, escalation, and what a lot of people say is a consistent mobilization of an audience that had real consequences for smaller artists, and eventually, Robernica themselves. But unfortunately, it's not just Rebornica. It's Bones, it's Deoxys, it's Shy Guy Princess, it's Nefskull, it's Sigma, it's Voltergeist, and probably more. They've rebranded so many times that I can't even keep track anymore, but obviously that's the point. In 2014, Robernica established themselves as a defining voice for the early FNAF fandom culture through their Tumblr presence, particularly on accounts like Robernica and Deoxys Robernica. Their AU interpretations quickly became foundational, influencing not just fan art, but entire characterizations across the fandom. Remember, we didn't have shit in the FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 days. However, this influence was almost immediately met with enforcement. Archived responses show Robernica correcting fans publicly with replies to fan art saying things like, "That's not how I wrote them," or "You're misunderstanding the character." Broadcasting these comments to a large audience usually resulted in their followers reinforcing the same correction, sometimes escalating into dogpiling and hateful behavior. Later Robernica critique accounts, which there are a lot of Robernica critique accounts, they frame this as one of the earliest examples of their audience being mobilized. Well, yeah, not always through direct instruction, but through highly visible correction that explicitly invites the mobilization of action to their fans, without ever condemning the behavior. This mobilization dynamic intensifies through the expansion of multiple interconnected accounts, including Dapper Deoxys. These separate accounts function less like separated spaces and more like extensions of a unified presence, amplifying both their content and the tone of their large fan base. This is super common now, having alternate accounts to boost your presence, but in the early Tumblr days, people thought that it was kind of deceiving. I personally think it's a bit of a nothing burger of an issue, but the mobilization of multiple accounts is furthering the dogpiling behavior. By 2015, the AU becomes more detailed, but with that detail comes a stricter enforcement of interpretation. Public corrections continue, and the same pattern repeats. A fan posted interpretation, Robernica responds, and the audience follows guns a-blazing. Even without explicit calls to action, the scale of Robernica's platform adds each correction into this fucked up and evil pot of reoccurring behavioral problems. The Doggone Donovan account became controversial because they were posting NSFW content of Robernica's characters, but like, that's not inherently awful, but it was 2015, 2016. So it was the end of the world because Robernica was asexual and asked people not to draw NSFW of their characters. Which, honestly, I kinda understand that. They are Robernica's characters, and if they want to draw NSFW without having their fanbase doing the same, they can. Even throwing Robernica's asexuality into the mix, it's a spectrum that really has nothing to do with them drawing NSFW fan art. Me personally, I'm ace, but sometimes I linger when I see hairy Omni-Man hanging ball on the TL, you know what I'm saying? Are you sure? Absolutely. So these accounts were all framed as different people, but their followers and lurkers were like, hey, you're all the same person. Why are you pretending that you aren't? But Robernica was like, no, guys, that was my cousin. Doggone Donovan's my cousin. But it was very obviously Robernica because they posted all of their art in the same art style. They were always online at the same exact time. No, guys, it wasn't me, Robernica, who drew Mike fucking Toy Chica or my OC fucking a cat. It wasn't me, guys. It was my cousin, Doggone Donovan. Are you sure? Bless your heart. Throughout 2016, Nefskull Critique and Nefskull Awareness began systematically documenting interactions, preserving screenshots, and contextualizing them as a reoccurring cycle. Correction, amplification, and backlash. Robernica's remaining audience is no longer reacting in a vacuum. They're reacting with full awareness of prior controversies. By 2018, Robernica's direct activity is almost non-existent in terms of the Robernica brand, but the ecosystem that they helped create does not, as well as their work on their rebranded accounts like Voltergeist that they still post on today. Their AUs still continue to circulate widely, and the expectations surrounding it remained heavily influenced by the years of enforced interpretation. People approach the AU material cautiously, often preemptively aligning with Robernica's established characterizations to avoid any and all correction, even well after they had moved on. Then in this late non-existent period from 2018 to 2019, Fnaf Nations appeared. Fnaf Nations attempted to essentially take over and reframe Robernica's AU, presenting themselves as an inheritor or a redefiner of the established story. From a fandom perspective, oh my gosh, yes, we are getting this fandom-defining AU back on track, but it's kind of ironic. With Fnaf Nations trying to take over this AU, they're taking over the control and interpretation that Robernica was utterly obsessed with, which they couldn't handle. Robernica at this point had completely stepped away from the FNAF AU, especially given their Voltergeist rebrand and stepping away from the FNAF fandom as a whole, but when they found out about the Fnaf Nations account, it was kinda nuclear. I mean, Fnaf Nation had meticulously recreated Robernica's art style, characters, and tone with really high accuracy. This replication was so precise that a lot of people genuinely mistook Fnaf Nation's work for being made by Robernica themselves, which speaks to both the technical skill involved and the depths of influence that Robernica's AU left on the fandom. So Robernica found out about Fnaf Nations and went kinda nuclear. This was also during their Shy Guy Princess rebrand on DeviantArt, which is around the same time as their Voltergeist rebrand. So in all of the screenshots, it's gonna be Shy Guy Princess as Robernica. So, Robernica contacts Fnaf Nations directly. The interaction didn't go well at all. Robernica told Fnaf Nations to fuck off, so Robernica goes public. The drama mutates into something much bigger than just two artists trying to agree on revitalizing an AU. So Robernica publicly called out Fnaf Nations for using their AU without permission and framing it as theft. So the accusation triggered both fan bases, and this is where the situation stops becoming about art and turns into a hissy fit meltdown. Because on one side, Robernica's fans are accusing Fnaf Nations of tracing, stealing, and disrespecting the original creator. But on the other side, Fnaf Nation supporters are pushing back, saying that Robernica has no right to control a fan-made AU based on an already existing franchise, and criticizing how the call-out was handled. So while Robernica and Fnaf Nations were DMing each other, they apparently told each other both to fuck off, which kinda seems minor on its own, but in a Tumblr DeviantArt fandom ecosystem, one that was already dominated by Robernica FNAF fans who already had a history of attacking anyone who disagreed with their Rebi-Roo, that fuck you was the equivalent of telling someone to go die in a fire during this time in fandom culture. Lord have fucking mercy. So things started to escalate into blocking sprees, subtweets, public posts trying to reinterpret every event as something it's not. Multiple people tried to mediate between the both of them, tried to offer neutral advice, then they got blocked, and they sealed both sides into their own little echo chambers. At the same time, Robernica's old patterns of behavior begin to resurface and get pulled right into the conversation. Allegations that already existed before, like harassment, aggressive responses to criticism, and encouraging fan retaliation, all start getting recirculated by the community. Obviously, not all of that is connected to the Fnaf Nations incident, but it's amplifying how people interpret Robernica's actions during it. Basically, it's no longer what's happening now, but whether it fits Robernica's pattern of behavior. It was a mutual escalation of both parties contributing to hostility, even if the power dynamic and fanbase sizes were definitely not equal. But the thing with Fnaf Nations is, that wasn't the first time that happened. It wasn't the first time that Robernica had harassed someone for making their own interpretation of their AU. And just like the other artists that Robernica did this to, Fnaf Nations deactivated their account at the peak of this drama. Which, honestly, that's the inevitable outcome for all that negativity and pressure. At the same time, Robernica was deleting tweets, they were withdrawing, they completely leaned into this Voltergeist rebrand, once again, erasing the entire trail of this conflict. This drama is so widely remembered, but also vaguely remembered because it's so poorly documented. But again, that's Robernica's whole thing. So Robernica is back in action with the same structural pattern that had already been documented for years. Public call-out, followed by audience amplification. The difference is scale, severity, and the target. Fnaf Nations was not a casual fan interpretation. This was someone who was deeply dedicated to preserving the AU itself. It was an act of love and care, not malicious intent, but Robernica's a professional victim at this point, so they don't give a fuck about that. So speaking of professional victim Robernica, there are a lot of call-out posts. The reason I hadn't said all of this other stuff a second ago is because I needed to reiterate the power of control and the power dynamic that Robernica had over their fandom. Because a lot of this shit that I'm about to mention got completely swept under the rug. I will also be linking the entire Rebornica in the description, because there are some things that I just didn't mention in this video because I didn't have enough evidence to say if it did or did not happen. Like I said, I will link everything down in the description, and we're gonna go over their call-outs and a bunch of other bullshit that they did, so let's keep this ball rolling, y'all. So Robernica was in this call-out doc for a multitude of reasons, but I'll kind of give you just a little synopsis here because it is the length of a fucking Lord of the Rings book. Robernica was getting jealous of their partner's biological sister, and then they were also shitty to said partner relationship-wise, but what I think is shitty is to say that you were possessed by two different ghosts to get out of a lie you told your partner. Then also proceeded to say the N-word multiple times. I don't know if it was the ghost that possessed them. Sorry. Then in another one of Robernica's relationships in 2016, so prior to the ghost possession, Robernica and another person in these Skype logs named Audio shipped their OCs together, and they would do NSFW smut roleplay. Well, this person, Audio, apparently also roleplayed this OC, Polly, with a friend named Ash's OC, Rick. So Robernica got mad and called Audio and Ash, screamed at both of them in the call, then guilt-tripped Audio when they said they just wanted to cut off the ship of their OCs together being canon. So Robernica was just like really fucked up about it and lashed out at Audio, saying they need to see the damn doctor to get their fucked up mind fix, and Robernica telling Audio that they're cutting themselves because their OCs weren't a canon ship anymore. Abusive and manipulative behavior on Robernica's side of things is a constant when it comes to their friendships and relationships. And speaking of their relationships again, there are a few speculations of Robernica grooming multiple people. My big issue is that for this video, there is so much evidence that has been lost or deleted. For one of the many allegations that I could find, a single archive of some tweets of a victim talking about Robernica talking about them, but there's no solid screenshots or evidence regarding this specific person. On the other hand, though, when Robernica was 19 in 2016, they were in a relationship with a 15-year-old. They were grooming a 15-year-old. There is no world where someone that is old enough to be in college needs to be dating someone in 9th or 10th grade. So Robernica, as a 19-year-old in 2016, what could they do? They could go out. They could buy cigarettes. They can party. They can live on their own. They can drive a car. They can enlist in the military. What can a 15-year-old do? Walk around the mall for a few hours by themselves, but only if they have permission from their mama. What 19-year-old has common ground with a 15-year-old? Anyways, Robernica also sent them porn, drew them NSFW art, then tried to backpedal and say in their country their relationship is legal. Which, that argument makes zero sense considering they had an NSFW Twitter and their bio literally said 18 plus only, indicating that they understand that minors shouldn't be on their page, but dating one and sending them NSFW art is fine. Also, no, dating a 15-year-old was not legal because the age of consent in the Philippines—
No, that's wrong.
I know I said Philippines, but they're actually from Malaysia. But my point still stands. The age of consent in Malaysia is also 16. Philippines is 16. Even if the age of consent was 15, fuck off. If the only thing that's stopping you from fucking with a baby is a perceived law, then what you're insinuating is if that law didn't exist, you'd be fucking with babies. Now, I need to take a lap. Give me 2 seconds. I take a fucking walk. I need to take a walk. Lord.
I'm Robernica. I like to groom minors. No, it was not a ghost, but I have to say allegedly.
Robernica's rise and fall is a common story of a young person gaining a massive following very quickly, it going to their head immediately, and it becoming everyone else's problem. No matter how hard Robernica, Bones, Voltergeist, whatever you want to call him, tried to erase and hide from the public, is still piddling around in different corners of the internet. Checking in on Robernica today, they seem to be doing really well in their own little circle. They're pretty big in the Splatoon fandom, their animations perform well on YouTube, and it seems like they're trying to put that part of their life behind them. Who knows? Maybe Robernica changed for the better. Maybe they got the mental health that they needed. Maybe it was a ghost. Okay, what I do know for sure is that, unfortunately, Robernica and their character designs made a large impact on the FNAF fandom as a whole, even having some of their designs be a reference for the FNAF movie. For a lot of early seasoned FNAF fans, this AU is what got them into the games. Hundreds, if not thousands, of seasoned FNAF fans fell in love with this story, the characters, the theories, the art, just for it all to come crumbling down because the creator of this AU ended up being a fucking freak. FNAF fans do not have a good track record for AUs in comics, man. My heart's been broke so many times. Robernica, Springtrap and Delia, Bluey capsules. Can someone be normal? Can someone be normal? After almost 2 months of research and combing the depths of forgotten Google Drives, you really start to feel bad for Robernica, but not in a sense of coddling them and not holding them responsible for their actions, but realizing how blatantly they needed to get off the internet and get help. That doesn't absolve them from wrongdoing or the people that they hurt, but they were stuck in an echo chamber of enabling behavior. All I can hope for Robernica at this point is that they turned a corner and grew into a better person. haven't. I mean, they're in their late 20s at this point. You would hope that they've done some reflecting and some growth and a lot of therapy, but even if they came back today and tried to revive the AU, I think it would do more harm than good. And while I do think that a lot of people would try and welcome them back, I fear a lot of their old behavior would just start creeping back in. Like I said earlier, the entire Resourcica is going to be linked in the description below, and any other links and sources that I used is also going to be down there. Thank you so much for watching. I worked really hard on this. I'm really fucking tired. Yeah. Bye!